My name is Violet Chen, and 3 weeks ago I stood in my father's study while he struck me across the face so hard my ears rang, looked me in the eyes with pure hatred, and told me I was getting nothing from his $230 million fortune. The room fell silent as my mother turned away, my brother smirked, and Dad's attorney shifted uncomfortably. "You don't belong in this family," he hissed. "You never did. Get out of my house." As blood trickled from my split lip, I reached into my purse and pulled out the DNA results I'd received that morning, the ones that would prove him right in the most horrifying way possible. But what those papers revealed wasn't just that I didn't share his blood. They revealed something so devastating, so criminal, that within 48 hours the FBI would be standing in that same study, putting my parents in handcuffs while the lawyers who drafted that will realize they had just excluded the rightful heir to the entire Chin pharmaceutical empire. If you're watching this and have ever felt like you don't belong in your own family, drop a comment and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you see inheritance, identity, and the lies families tell to protect their darkest secrets. Before that catastrophic day in the study, before the slap that changed everything, I need you to understand the 28 years of rejection that led me to take that DNA test in the first place. The Chin family was Boston's fourth wealthiest dynasty, built on 3 generations of pharmaceutical success. My grandfather, Wei Chin, immigrated from Taiwan in 1960 with medical expertise and revolutionary ideas about drug development. He founded Chin Pharmaceuticals in a rented laboratory with equipment he bought secondhand, and through brilliant research and strategic patents, built it into a company worth over $230 million by the time I was born. My father, Richard Chen, took over the company when I was 5 years old. He was everything you'd expect from a pharmaceutical mogul: brilliant, ruthless, obsessed with legacy and reputation. He stood 6 feet tall with perfectly styled black hair that he dyed religiously every 2 weeks to hide the gray, wore custom Italian suits that cost more than most people's cars, and commanded boardrooms with an intensity that made grown men nervous. In business, he was respected and feared. At home, he was a tyrant who measured his children's worth by how perfectly they reflected his image. My mother, Catherine, came from the Whitmore family, old Boston money that made even the Chens look like newcomers. The Whitmore name opened doors that pharmaceutical millions couldn't buy, society connections that valued bloodlines over bank accounts. She was elegant, cold, and far more concerned with her position on charity boards than with actual charity. She treated motherhood like another social obligation, something to be managed by nannies and boarding schools while she maintained her public image. I can count on one hand the number of times she hugged me, and most of those were when photographers were present at company galas. Then there was my brother, Marcus. 5 years older than me. He was everything I could never be. Marcus looked exactly like father, the same sharp aristocratic features, the same calculating dark eyes, the same way of entering a room and commanding attention without saying a word. He breezed through Phillips Exeter Academy, got into Harvard on legacy admission, and joined Chin Pharmaceuticals as vice president of development immediately after graduation despite having no real scientific knowledge or business experience beyond watching our father operate. Growing up in the Chin mansion should have been every child's dream. Our estate in Brookline sprawled across 8 acres with 12 bedrooms, an indoor pool, a tennis court, and gardens that required a full-time staff of 4 groundskeepers to maintain. Crystal chandeliers hung in every major room. Original artwork worth millions decorated the walls. Our garage housed 6 luxury vehicles. But behind those iron gates and perfectly manicured hedges, I was slowly dying inside, suffocated by the weight of being fundamentally, inexplicably different from everyone else. The differences started with my appearance. While Marcus had inherited Dad's height and angular features and Mom's pale porcelain complexion, I was shorter, softer, with features that didn't quite match anyone in our extensive family photo collection. My eyes were rounder, a different shape entirely. My hair had a completely different texture that no amount of expensive salon treatments could change. My skin tone was warmer, darker, refusing to fit the Chin family aesthetic no matter how much Mom spent on dermatologists and treatments. By the time I was 10, I'd overheard enough whispered comments at family gatherings to know that people noticed. She doesn't look much like Richard or Catherine, does she? Must take after some distant relative. Funny how genetics work sometimes. The explanations were always vague, always uncomfortable, and always followed by someone quickly changing the subject. But the physical differences were nothing compared to the emotional chasm. From my earliest memories, I felt like I was watching my family through thick glass, technically present but never truly included, never truly seen. Family dinners were elaborate performances where Marcus and Dad discussed pharmaceutical industry strategy, while Mom interjected with comments about which society events required our attendance. If I tried to contribute anything, suggest an idea, or share something from my day, the conversation would simply flow around me as if I hadn't spoken, as if I were invisible. When I was 8 years old, I won the regional science fair with a project on antibiotic resistance in common bacteria. I'd spent 3 months on the research, conducting careful experiments, documenting everything with a precision that I'd later learn came naturally to me. I was ecstatic, certain that this achievement would finally make Dad see me, finally earn his approval. I burst into his study with my first-place ribbon and trophy, my heart pounding with excitement and hope. He looked up from his papers with obvious annoyance at the interruption. "That's nice, Violet. Close the door on your way out. Marcus just got accepted into the advanced mathematics program at his school, and I need to call the headmaster to discuss his future." He turned back to his phone without another glance at my trophy. That was the exact moment, standing in that doorway holding my award, that I learned no achievement would ever be enough to matter. School became my sanctuary and my obsession. I threw myself into academics with desperate intensity, as if perfect grades could somehow translate into family acceptance. I scored at the top of every class, won academic awards consistently, joined debate team, math club, science olympiad, anything that might make me valuable. My bedroom walls disappeared behind certificates, ribbons, medals, and plaques, a shrine to achievement that my parents never once came to see. Meanwhile, Marcus coasted through his expensive private school with mediocre grades that didn't matter because everyone knew he'd inherit the company regardless. He spent his weekends at parties, his summers on yachts with other wealthy families' children, building the social connections that Dad valued more than actual competence. And it worked. Every accomplishment Marcus achieved, no matter how minor, was celebrated with expensive dinners and proud phone calls to relatives. Every achievement I earned was met with distracted nods and quickly forgotten. The rejection crystallized into something harder when I was 13. It was Christmas morning, and the family had gathered in our formal living room, which Mom had decorated with a designer's help to look like something from a magazine spread. Under the enormous tree were elaborately wrapped presents, each one carefully selected to reflect the recipient's importance in the family hierarchy. Marcus opened his gifts: a new laptop, expensive clothes, an envelope containing the keys to a luxury car he'd receive when he turned 16 in 3 months. Mom and Dad beamed at him, taking photos, laughing at his excitement. Then it was my turn. I opened my presents methodically. Practical clothes in colors I didn't like, generic gift cards, a scientific calculator that was useful, but entirely impersonal. The difference in thought and value was staggering and obvious to everyone in the room. "Why does Marcus get a car and I get a calculator?" I asked quietly, the hurt finally overwhelming my usual silence. Dad's expression hardened instantly. "Marcus has proven himself responsible. He represents this family well. When you learn to do the same, perhaps you'll be treated accordingly." The message was clear. I was not good enough, would never be good enough, and should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. High school intensified both my achievements and my isolation. I graduated as valedictorian with a perfect GPA, scored in the 99th percentile on my SATs, and earned admission to MIT with a partial scholarship. The scholarship part enraged my father, who saw it as embarrassing that his daughter needed financial aid when we were worth hundreds of millions. "It makes us look poor," he complained to Mom within my hearing. "Like we can't afford to pay full tuition." "Then pay the full tuition," I'd replied, hurt and angry. I didn't ask for the scholarship. They offered it based on merit. Merit, he'd scoffed. As if that matters more than reputation. He refused to attend my high school graduation, claiming a business conflict that I later learned was a golf game with potential investors. At MIT, I finally found people who valued intelligence and hard work. I majored in biochemistry with a minor in business, maintaining a 3.9 GPA while working part-time in research labs. I made real friends for the first time, people who liked me for who I was rather than tolerating me because of my family name. My roommate, Jade Kim, became the sister I'd never had, someone who actually listened when I talked and cared about my feelings. It was Jade who first voiced what I'd been afraid to think. We were in our dorm room junior year, and I'd just gotten off a painful phone call with my mother, who had forgotten my birthday entirely. "Violet," Jade said carefully, "have you ever considered that maybe you're not the problem? That maybe your family is just terrible?" The suggestion was revolutionary. I'd spent my entire life believing that if I could just be better, smarter, more valuable, then my family would finally love me. The possibility that their rejection wasn't my fault, that I wasn't inherently unlovable, cracked something open inside me. After graduation, I joined a biotechnology startup in Cambridge instead of Chin Pharmaceuticals, a decision that caused a massive fight with my father. "You're throwing away your legacy," he'd shouted over the phone. "Rejecting everything this family built. You never wanted me at Chin Pharmaceuticals anyway," I'd replied with newfound courage. "You made that clear every single day of my life. Because you've never shown proper respect or understanding of what it means to be a Chin. You're an embarrassment to this family name." The words should have destroyed me, but instead they crystallized something. I was done trying to earn love from people who were determined not to give it. I threw myself into my work at the startup, helping develop innovative drug delivery systems. I was genuinely good at it, my research background and natural aptitude combining into real professional success. Within 3 years, I'd been promoted twice and was leading my own research team. My personal life finally started to bloom as well. I met Trevor, a patent attorney, at a biotech conference. He was kind, funny, genuinely interested in my work, and came from a warm, loving family that welcomed me immediately. His parents treated me with more affection in one dinner than my own parents had shown in 28 years. When Trevor proposed after 2 years together, I said yes without hesitation. I called my parents to share the news, hoping foolishly that this milestone might finally bridge the gap between us. Mom answered the phone with her usual distant tone. "That's lovely, dear. Who is he again?" "Trevor Morrison. I've mentioned him before. He's a patent attorney. We met at..." "Morrison?" She cut me off, and I could hear her covering the phone to speak to someone else. "Richard. She's marrying someone named Morrison. Do we know any Morrisons?" My father's voice came through, loud enough for me to hear. "Tell her to push the wedding until after the Henderson merger. We don't need distractions, and I certainly don't want to waste money on some elaborate ceremony for a marriage that probably won't last." Mom returned to the phone. "Your father thinks next fall would be better. We'll have our accountant discuss an appropriate budget with you. Something tasteful, but not extravagant. No need to waste resources." I hung up and cried in Trevor's arms for an hour. He held me and quietly suggested what he'd been hinting at for months. "Maybe it's time to stop letting them hurt you. You don't need their approval or their money. We can have whatever wedding we want." He was right. We planned a small, beautiful ceremony in Vermont with our closest friends and Trevor's family. I sent my parents an invitation without any real hope they'd attend. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a stiff card in the mail. "Richard and Catherine Chin regret they are unable to attend due to prior business commitments." Marcus didn't even bother to respond. The wedding was perfect despite their absence. Or maybe because of it. Trevor's mother walked me down the aisle, tears of joy streaming down her face. His father gave a toast about gaining a daughter and welcoming me into their family. It was the first time I'd ever felt truly celebrated for simply existing. But the rejection still haunted me. On our honeymoon in Greece, Trevor found me crying on the hotel balcony at midnight. "Talk to me," he said gently, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. "I just keep wondering what's wrong with me," I admitted. "Why they've always treated me like I don't matter. Like I'm somehow fundamentally unacceptable." Trevor was quiet for a moment, then said something that changed everything. "Have you ever considered taking a DNA test? One of those ancestry things?" Maybe understanding your genetic background would give you some answers. Or, at least some peace. The suggestion lodged in my brain. A week after we returned from our honeymoon, I ordered a comprehensive DNA kit. It arrived in discreet packaging, and I followed the instructions carefully. Saliva sample, sealed tube, mail to laboratory. Then I waited 6 weeks, trying not to build up expectations while simultaneously obsessing over what the results might reveal. The email notification came on a Tuesday morning while I was at work. Your DNA results are ready. My hands shook as I logged into the account, Trevor beside me for moral support. We decided to check together during my lunch break, sitting in my car in the parking garage. The ancestry breakdown loaded first. I expected to see Chinese heritage from my father's side, maybe some European from my mother's background. Instead, the results showed something completely different. 48% Korean, 32% Japanese, 15% Chinese, 5% Southeast Asian. No European ancestry at all.
0.
That can't be right, I whispered, refreshing the page. The results remained the same. Trevor's legal mind kicked in immediately. Violet, if there's no European DNA, then Catherine can't be your biological mother. And the Chinese percentage is too low for Richard to be your father. My phone rang before I could process his words. Unknown number. I answered automatically, my brain still reeling. Hello. Miss Chun? This is Dr. Patricia Lin from the DNA testing laboratory. I'm calling because your results have triggered some alerts in our system. I need to ask you some questions. First, were you adopted? No, I said, my voice hollow. At least, not that I was ever told.
I see.
And do you have reason to believe your parents are your biological parents? I thought they were, until about 60 seconds ago. Dr. Lin was quiet for a moment. Miss Chen, I need to inform you that your DNA profile matches someone in our database. A missing person case from 1996. A baby who was reported kidnapped from Seoul National University Hospital in South Korea. The world tilted sideways. Trevor grabbed my arm to steady me. What are you saying? I managed to ask. I'm saying that you match the genetic profile of Lee Minji, a baby girl who disappeared from the hospital nursery 28 years ago. Her parents submitted DNA to multiple databases years ago, hoping for exactly this kind of match. Miss Chun, I need to ask, do you have any memories of your early childhood? Anything before age 3 or 4? I realized with dawning horror that I didn't. My earliest clear memory was from kindergarten, age 5. Everything before that was blank, absent, as if those years had simply been erased.
No, iwi para.
I don't remember anything before kindergarten. That's consistent with what we see in cases of childhood trauma or relocation. Ms. Chen, I've already notified the FBI as required by law when a DNA match corresponds to an open kidnapping case. They'll want to speak with you. And there's something else.
She paused.
The biological parents who submitted this DNA, they've been searching for their daughter for 28 years. Would you be willing to speak with them? I couldn't breathe. Trevor took the phone from my trembling hands and spoke to Dr. Lin on my behalf, getting details, asking legal questions, promising I'd cooperate with authorities. When he finally hung up, we sat in silence in my parked car while my entire identity crumbled around me. I was kidnapped, I finally said aloud, testing the words. Richard and Catherine aren't my parents.
They stole me.
That's why I never fit. That's why they always treated me like I didn't belong. Because I didn't. Because I was never supposed to be theirs. Trevor pulled me close. We need to call the FBI. And probably a lawyer. This is going to get complicated very fast. He was right. Within hours, FBI agents were sitting in our apartment, asking questions, taking additional DNA samples, and showing me photographs. Photos of a Korean couple, middle-aged now but younger in the earlier pictures, holding a baby girl with my eyes. My actual eyes, not the anomaly they'd been in the Chin family, but perfectly normal, expected, fitting. These are Ji-hoon and Sunmi Lee, Agent Rodriguez explained gently. In 1996, they were visiting family in Seoul from their home in Los Angeles. Sunmi gave birth to a daughter, Minji, at Seoul National University Hospital. On the third day, while Sunmi was sleeping and Ji-hoon had gone to get food, someone entered the nursery and took their baby. Security footage showed a woman, but the quality was too poor for identification. The case went cold, but the Lees never stopped searching. How did I end up with the Chens? I asked, though part of me already knew. Agent Rodriguez exchanged glances with her partner. That's what we need to determine. Richard and Catherine Chen were in Seoul in early 1996 on business. They returned to Boston with a daughter they claimed was born via a surrogate, with forged documents supporting that story. We are investigating how they obtained those documents and who facilitated the kidnapping. The next week was a nightmare of interviews, statements, and media attention that we tried desperately to contain. The story was too explosive to keep quiet for long. Wealthy pharmaceutical heirs had apparently kidnapped a baby from South Korea and raised her as their own for 28 years. When the news broke, it became an international scandal. Through it all, I couldn't stop thinking about the slap, the will reading that hadn't happened yet but was scheduled for 2 weeks away. Richard had summoned me to Boston for important family business, and now I understood with perfect clarity what he'd planned. He was going to publicly exclude me from his will, his final rejection, the ultimate statement that I had never been and would never be his daughter. Part of me wanted to refuse to go, to cut ties completely and begin building a relationship with my biological parents, who had been sobbing with joy and disbelief on video calls from Los Angeles. Ji-hoon was a structural engineer, Sunmi a music teacher. They were warm, emotional, and had shown me more genuine love in 3 video conversations than the Chens had in 28 years. But another part of me needed closure. Needed to face Richard and Catherine knowing the truth. Needed to see their faces when their lies collapsed around them. Trevor tried to talk me out of going. Violet, they don't deserve your presence. They kidnapped you, lied to you your entire life, and you don't owe them anything. I know, I said, but I need to do this. I need to look them in the eye and watch them realize I know everything. So 2 weeks after receiving the DNA results, with FBI agents following at a discreet distance and Trevor by my side, I drove to the Chin estate in Brookline for the will reading. The DNA results were in my purse, along with a letter from my biological parents and legal documents Agent Rodriguez had helped me prepare. The housekeeper, Mrs. Park, answered the door. She'd always been kind to me, one of the few sources of warmth in that cold house. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. Miss Violet, she whispered in Korean, a language I was just beginning to learn I understood fragments of. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what they'd done. I believe you, I said, squeezing her hand. It's not your fault. She led me to the study where the family had gathered. Richard sat behind his massive desk, looking older than I remembered. Catherine perched on the leather sofa, a glass of wine already in her hand despite it being only 2 in the afternoon. Marcus stood by the window, phone in hand, looking bored and annoyed at having to attend. The family attorney, Gerald Thompson, sat in one of the client chairs, expensive briefcase open beside him. He looked uncomfortable, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. Years later, I'd learned he had tried to talk Richard out of the public will reading, calling it unnecessarily cruel and legally questionable. Richard had insisted. You're late, Richard said coldly as I entered, not offering me a seat. Trevor remained in the doorway, a silent, supportive presence. Traffic, I replied simply, remaining standing. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. Gerald cleared his throat. Perhaps we should begin? I have other appointments this afternoon. Richard nodded curtly. Read it. What followed was the most painful 15 minutes of my life up to that point. Gerald read through the will methodically. Massive bequests to Marcus, including controlling interest in Chin Pharmaceuticals, the estate, and the majority of Richard's liquid assets. Generous provisions for Catherine. Donations to various charities that would burnish the Chin family reputation. Detailed instructions for maintaining the family legacy. Then Gerald reached my section. His voice faltered slightly as he read, To Violet Chen, I leave nothing. She has proven herself unworthy of the Chen name and legacy. She has rejected this family at every turn, and I hereby reject her claim to any inheritance. This is my final word on the matter. The silence that followed was absolute. Richard stared at me, clearly expecting tears, collapse, begging. Instead, I smiled. A real smile that made him frown in confusion. "Is that it?" asked calmly. "No further commentary on my unworthiness? No final lecture about how I've disappointed you?" His face flushed with anger. "You find this amusing? You ungrateful. Ungrateful." I cut him off, my voice rising. Ungrateful for what? Exactly? For a lifetime of rejection? For being treated like an intruder in my own home? For watching you celebrate Marcus's mediocrity while dismissing my achievements? "How dare you?" He started to stand, but I stepped forward, holding my ground.
No.
"How dare you? How dare you stand there and judge my worthiness when you're nothing but a liar and a criminal?" Richard's hand shot out and connected with my face before anyone could react. The slap was hard enough to split my lip and make my head snap to the side. Catherine gasped. Marcus actually looked up from his phone. Gerald stood up in shock. "Get out of my house," Richard hissed, his face inches from mine. "You don't belong in this family. You never did." I touched my bleeding lip, then reached into my purse with steady hands. "You're absolutely right," I said, pulling out the envelope. "I don't belong in this family. Because I'm not part of this family. I never was." I handed the DNA results to Gerald, who opened them with shaking hands. I watched his expression shift from confusion to horror as he read. "What is this?" Richard demanded, snatching the papers. His face went white as he read, then red with rage. "This is forgery. Some desperate attempt to—" "It's not forgery," I said calmly. "It's been verified by the FBI. I'm not your daughter, Richard. I'm not Catherine's daughter. My name isn't even Violet Chen. It's Li Minji, and I was kidnapped from a hospital in Seoul 28 years ago."
You bought me. Or stole me.
"The investigation will determine which." Catherine's wine glass slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. Marcus had gone completely still. Gerald was staring at the documents, clearly recognizing the legal catastrophe unfolding before him. "You're insane," Richard sputtered, but his eyes betrayed his panic. "This is some scheme, some manipulation. The FBI is outside right now," I continued, waiting for me to give them the signal. "They have enough evidence to arrest both of you for kidnapping, falsifying documents, and trafficking a child across international borders. The only reason you're not in handcuffs already is because I asked them to let me do this first.
To hear you read that will.
To watch you try to erase me one final time." I turned to Gerald, who looked like he might be sick. "That will is invalid, by the way. You can't disinherit someone who is never legally your child. And since Violet Chen doesn't actually exist as a legal entity, all those carefully worded exclusions are meaningless." "What do you want?" Catherine finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "Money? We can pay you to keep quiet." The offer was so predictable, so perfectly in character, that I almost laughed. "I don't want anything from you. I want you to know that my real parents, Ji-hoon and Sunmi Lee, have been searching for me for 28 years. They never gave up hope. They loved me before they even met me. And they're waiting in Los Angeles to finally bring their daughter home." I looked at each of them one final time. Richard, his empire about to collapse around him. Catherine, her social status about to become a punchline. Marcus, finally realizing his inheritance was built on a crime that would destroy everything. "You were right about one thing," I said to Richard. "I don't belong here. I belong with people who actually know how to love."
Goodbye.
I walked out of that study, out of that house, and gave Agent Rodriguez the signal. As Trevor and I drove away, I watched in the rearview mirror as FBI agents entered the Chen estate. My phone buzzed with a video call from Los Angeles. Ji-hoon and Sunmi's faces appeared on the screen, tears streaming down their cheeks, arms outstretched as if they could hug me through the phone. "Minji," Sunmi said, her voice breaking. "Our precious daughter. Come home." For the first time in my life, I knew exactly where home was. That was 6 months ago. The legal aftermath has been complex and ongoing. Richard and Catherine are facing federal charges for kidnapping and trafficking. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged birth certificates, bribed officials, a paper trail of payments to a now-deceased hospital administrator who had facilitated the abduction. Marcus has been trying to distance himself from the scandal, claiming he knew nothing about his parents' crime. He's probably telling the truth. He was 5 when they brought me home, too young to understand. Chun Pharmaceuticals stock plummeted when news broke. Several board members resigned. Richard was forced to step down as CEO, and the company is currently being restructured under new management. The $230 million fortune has been frozen during the legal proceedings, and there's talk of it being seized as proceeds of crime. I've moved to Los Angeles to be near my real parents. Jihoon and Sunmi are everything I dreamed parents could be: warm, supportive, genuinely interested in my life and my happiness. They cry every time they look at me, 28 years of grief and joy tangled together. I'm learning Korean, discovering my culture, and slowly building the relationship that was stolen from us. Trevor and I are stronger than ever. His unwavering support through this nightmare has shown me what real partnership looks like. We're talking about starting our own family someday, children who will grow up knowing they're loved unconditionally. The hardest part has been grieving the childhood I should have had. I'll never get those years back. I'll never know who I might have become if I'd grown up as Minji Lee instead of Violet Chin. The trauma of those early years, even though I don't remember them consciously, has shaped me in ways I'm still discovering. But I'm also grateful. Grateful that the truth came out. Grateful that I found my real family before it was too late. Grateful that I survived the Chin family's emotional abuse and emerged stronger. Most of all, I'm grateful that I never gave up on the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong, that I didn't belong, because that feeling was trying to tell me the truth all along. The trial is set to begin in 3 months. I'll have to testify, face Richard and Catherine one more time, and relive the moment I discovered my entire life was built on their crime. But I won't be alone. Jihoon and Sunmi will be there, Trevor will be there, and I'll finally have the family I always deserved standing beside me. As for the Chin fortune, the lawyers tell me there's a possibility I could have a legal claim to part of it. Richard and Catherine spent 28 years using their wealth to maintain the illusion I was their daughter. Some of that money supported my upbringing, paid for my education. But honestly, I don't want it. Blood money from people who stole me can't buy back what they took. My real inheritance isn't money. It's the family I've found, the identity I've reclaimed, and the truth that finally set me free. If you're watching this and something about your family has never felt right, trust that instinct. Seek answers. Take the DNA test. Ask the uncomfortable questions. The truth might be painful, but living a lie is worse. Your real family, the people who actually love and value you, might be out there waiting. Have you ever discovered something that changed your entire understanding of your family? Drop your story in the comments below. Hit like if this resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more stories about family secrets, betrayal, and the shocking truths that change everything. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their feelings of not belonging might be trying to tell them something important. Thank you for listening to my story. May you all find where you truly belong.